Guys, that was amazing. 4 really brilliant presentations. I enjoyed them so much. And there's a huge amount to talk about, and we actually finished a little early, so we can have a proper conversation. This is brilliant. I also see the potential for some game show action here, actually, because I'm wondering, maybe the audience can tell me whether we should use my questions or the questions that Alice just slipped me. Apparently that session was about expanding the centers of design discourse. Thank you, thank you. Anyway, it's not a democracy. All those issues overlap in really interesting ways, and there's 2 questions to my mind that run through all of them. The first one is who's benefiting from these moves into Asia and the Middle East and so on. And the second one is which canon are we developing or protecting? And Aric, your presentation touched on both of those, obviously, and you used this great phrase, resorting to Asia. You were talking about Paul Rudolph, and it was even better, actually, resorting to Asia past his prime, which I think a lot of architects did in the 2000s. And you showed the work of Charlotte Perriand, and you were illustrating how her work is kind of enlightened by her relationship with Asia. And then you said, but this isn't revisionism, you know, it's not about replacing, in a way, a Western canon with an Asian one. And I felt like asking, why not, actually? Because, you know, revisionism, I mean, don't we need some revisionism, actually?
You know, we actually, I mean, that's a very good point. I mean, for me at least, if we were to do a collection, build a collection of, again, post-war Japanese design in this example, which we are, I would actually insist that we include works by Perriand and so on and so forth, because sort of philosophically, there's too much isolationism in the world as it is, and I think we are still, we are perhaps naive enough to still believe that in a very open world in which we acknowledge and actually embrace the interactions between and among people and places. The notion of identity came up earlier today, and it certainly comes up a lot, not just in Hong Kong, but in a lot of places. Identity is a very healthy thing, but I think the way it plays out oftentimes, not just in Hong Kong, but we see more and more in Europe and in the US and other places as well. It's quite dangerous, actually. It verges on this kind of nationalism that we as a museum do not sort of believe in. So for us, it's very important to redirect the focus to our part of the world. We think that's what we're there for. That's what we're about. But it's not about closing ourselves off from the rest of the world.
That's a good answer. Isn't it politically correct, though, to do what you're doing?
Well, I mean, you know, why not? I mean, you know, it's funny. You know, this is horrible, but a lot of times when I'm thinking about what we're trying to do, I can't help but think of those HSBC ads that you used to see in the airport. You know, where they show the cricket, and in one place the cricket is a pest, another place it's a pet, in another place it's a snack, you know, and in some ways, I mean, it's as much as I hate to admit it, those ads do kind of resonate for us a little bit too, because I think it is an acceptance that there are multiple ways of seeing things that don't have to be in conflict, but that can hopefully inform each other.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Nawar, your presentation, I mean, it really touched me actually, because I'm also very sensitive to these cliches that happen when, you know, especially when Western architects go to work in the Gulf, especially, and suddenly everything has to become about pattern and kind of, you know, Islamic references. And we've seen what happened, but we've seen what happened in Dubai when they weren't sensitive enough to local context and just built, you know, a kind of Las Vegas style, you know, skyscraper-led city. And I'm wondering how you see this playing out. I mean, you're anxious for some kind of distinct placemaking and a kind of rootedness in local culture that the people who were inviting those architects and teachers and and schools to come and set up shop in the Gulf didn't respect enough, in a way. I'm wondering if there's a way forward where effectively, the Gulf can just skip a step in the same way that maybe Asia can skip a step. Maybe they didn't have, industrial production, while here in the West we're actually kind of superseding that and going into craft. Maybe you can kind of just skip a stage. I don't know, I'm just ad-libbing, but how do you see it playing out in your region?
I think it's very important to try to include the locals, because it's like you said, there is a gap. There is either the Western projects that are being built and that look fabulous, and then there is the struggling local designers that are trying to prove something or trying to get to work on projects. So I think it's important to, and this is why I propose that the education in the Gulf region needs to be a lot more sensitive and more stronger, so people can understand, people in charge, commissioners can understand that locals can do it as well. And it's not, and because we do have this idea that the West does it better. And I think it's important to start the conversation and start to work on it, and yes.
I mean, coming to you, Amanda, both of those points tie very closely to your presentation about, in a sense, China becoming the most important consumer power, but apart from that, also a kind of design power in the making, and that there is an emerging local, or an emerging kind of canon of Chinese designers that most of us are probably unaware of, and that it's not the case anymore that they are trying to kind of just emulate Western styles. And but there is, I mean, this is all tied up with kind of ethical issues of cheap fashion and cheap labor. And I also kind of ask you for some kind of future projection about, what do you see a tipping point coming when they're going to start influencing us more than we're influencing them?
Yes, I do, but when I spoke with the Chinese high fashion designers that I did, they were at pains to say they don't want to supersede, or they want to be a part of this global picture. And so they're very, very respectful of the European fashion designers in particular, and it's much more about contributing and adding to the story versus taking over, which was a surprise for me and a good one. I really like what you said about this idea of can these emerging design centres leapfrog because they haven't been involved and engaged over the last 100 years, and suddenly are on the spot. And I agree with that. One designer I spoke with in particular, Wang Yang, who you'll know well, Eric, from Zigzag, his Zigzag brand, he said, our kind of village, family-oriented communities, cultural approach has set us up very, very nicely for this internet technological age and sharing fashion design. And it was such a great point. They don't have to go through this kind of siloed, departmentalized design approach that I think that we've had here in the West over the last 100 years. So I think they are positioned for this time, but I don't think they want to kind of take it over or disregard what's been achieved in the West.
Yeah, so it's a new kind of globalism in the sense that it's not about cultural imperialism, but it really is kind of a network age where it's kind of soft power constantly, intersecting.
Exactly.
Sandra, I really enjoyed your presentation, and especially your little kind of activist intervention at the Prada store. I'm wondering whether, I touched on this briefly earlier, I'm wondering whether museums face a problem. Because as they court larger audiences, they need to tackle the subjects that can handle those audiences. And in design, the only designers who are celebrities, who are household names, who can attract the huge audiences like the Alexander McQueen show, the only designers are fashion designers. Therefore, I think we see a pattern developing where every major museum is going to do a major fashion show every year, or a major celebrity show every year, like the V&A did David Bowie, their most successful show. Every time they raise the bar, they have to meet that bar. So which pop star are they looking at next Do you know what I mean? I know that question is going around the museum now. So do you see that as a problem, or maybe it's a good thing?
Thank you first. I don't think it's a problem. At first I saw this as a problem. I was against this culture and commerce interaction, and I wanted those to be very separate. But I saw that this is not the solution. And also having those blockbuster shows, it's not a bad thing. You have this major effect, but at the same time, there is always something to learn from it. Even I visited David Bowie show, and I think it was great. Yes,
No, I did too. Maybe we can tease more out of that situation. Because you raised a very good question. Do these brands need the museums? On one level, yes, they want the kind of cultural validation. But do the museums need the brands more? Do you see what I mean?
Yes. I feel that museums have to approach the brands themselves to communicate fully what is going on with this brand or design in this certain house.
Yeah, because when the Guggenheim did it with Armani, they were roundly criticized, weren't they?
Yes. Yeah, in 2001.
I think they were criticised because it was badly done as opposed to it going on right. Was that the...
So when it's badly done, one leaves oneself open to the accusation that it's just kind of marketing.
Yes, it was just marketing. People felt that it was a shop in Guggenheim, so that was the problem. There has to be, museum has to engage in a process of exhibition making, because
Absolutely.
they have this knowledge of making an exhibition.
And yet, from your presentation, you really got across the message that the more innovative curators or presenters of this design, in a sense, were the department stores and not the museums, right? You were showing that sequence, yes, where it was like, which one is the museum, which one is the department store, and it was always, wasn't it always the museum that was the kind of more traditional?
No, it wasn't.
Okay,
no.
Okay, that was just my bias. I think we have a little bit more time. Let me just check for a couple more minutes. Good. Because I think we can still get more out of this. Who's benefiting? Who's benefiting from these? You know, I think particularly about, say, all these schools that went to open up branches in the Gulf. I think about all the architects who went to. Sorry, Konstantin. All the architects who went to China to, you know, build their worst work. You know, there's a certain kind of opportunism to this relationship, which right-minded people like you and, you know, and others, you're finding a very positive vein in this, which is truly admirable. But there has been a kind of opportunism here that hasn't really benefited the host cultures in a sense as much as they would have liked. Do you agree?
Yes, I do. To start with, I mean, it's been since the early 1990s where schools started in the Gulf region, and they are on the rise. And we thought that with time, or I thought in my research that maybe there was a plan with time where there is more consideration to the region, but there was not. Like there is no plan. And if there is any plan, for example, there's the American University in Dubai. They had once a chair of their visual communications program, and she was the director of the Khat Foundation. The foundation is dedicated to research on Arabic type and all of the developments and integrating in new designs. There, under the Khat Foundation, there's the designer of, for example, the Arabic version of Helvetica. So Nadine Shaheen. So, and the school was really doing a very good job for a couple of years, but then the chair left the department, and then everything else changed, and this is what's been happening. And it's the same case, for example, at the school where I studied, where I graduated, the American University of Kuwait. It started really well, a promising start, but then it didn't really continue as we expected it's going to be.
Right, so there's no kind of long-term engagement in that place.
Exactly,
Yeah.
And yes, I can't really point out I can't point fingers who is really who's responsible for this. It's the countries, the governments, the schools that are coming. So it's really, like I said, it's really complex.
Aric, I just realized why you were smiling when I made that joke about people doing their worst work. I wasn't talking about Herzog and de Meuron, by the way. That was it's a very beautiful.
Think that you would.
No. It's a very beautiful museum. I certainly respect their work. Alice, shall we have a coffee, or shall we? Yeah.
Well, can
maybe we could, if we have time, it would be great to take a question from. Why don't you start, Aric?
Well, I just because I mean, actually all the students those really were all fantastic presentations that I'm still sort of wrapping my mind around all of them. But Nawar, you do bring up a very important point, and one that as an interloper myself in Hong Kong, my family's not from Hong Kong. I don't have any. I don't speak Cantonese. It is a question, and going back to this opportunism too that Justin, you're talking about. As you said, it is very complicated. I mean, of course, there are people who are sort of. There is an element of opportunism, and as there always has been everywhere in the world. But at the same time, it's an issue of local acceptance too. I don't think it's fair to sort of say that everybody who goes abroad to do something is doing it purely to make a quick buck, and then take off. It's an experiment, and I think the underlying assumption is that you have to bring new ideas to different places and to see what happens. Now, sometimes. It works well. Sometimes it doesn't. I mean, you mentioned the new museum that's
Yes, Qatar Islamic Faculty Studies.
Yes, and that I think you mentioned that as a good example, right, of sort of Islamic architecture, contemporary Islamic architecture coming into its own. But that would not have happened, without this other sort of phase. And even for us at M+, we have a lot of pressure. Well, it's not pressure. I mean, we're totally on board with this to sort of train locally born and bred Hong Kong people to be the next generation of curators. We're fully aware and accept that we are transitional figures. The same way transitional figures have always. Moved around the world. I mean, New York is full of people. New York is what it is because of people who came from other places. Same with London, Paris in the early 20th century. So these are phases that I think and I think we need to sort of think long term and big picture.
I'd like to also add to this. The problem is as well in the Gulf region. Everything is happening all at once. There are schools that are coming up, and there are museums that are opening up, and there's everything that's happening all at once. And I think this is also a problem because they, like you mentioned, the people aren't really, they don't really see their culture in this way. It's sort of new to them, So I think this is a problem, and this is going back to what I mentioned with a plan, not having a plan. There should be a plan. So.
Aric, I love that comment that you made on that point about craft thinking being a really good kind of way of approach in these very intense developing situations. And it's not so much craft thinking of, let's get back to wool and bits of wood. It's craft thinking in terms of a slowing down, process-based thinking and really being conscious of what we're doing. And I love that as a kind of inspiration point to these very intense situations.
Maybe we can just keep this open, and if anyone else has any questions for each other, or if anyone in the room has a burning question, please put your hand up. Yeah, there's one lady here. Maybe I can pass you my microphone, actually.
Oh, can I just talk loud?
No, you can't.
Microphone's gonna make me nervous.
Hello.
I was thinking about what you said about fashion and museums, and maybe what the problem is that they're picking a brand, say Armani, and it seems like they're being a cheerleader. Instead of perhaps looking at fashion exhibition as asking some serious critical questions, maybe they should be doing shows saying, male dress, how do we represent manhood? Or female body exposure, the history of, or something, so that instead of just being a cheerleader for a company, they're really presenting issues of fashion in a critical way. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I think when a museum does a show on Jeff Koons, they're probably raising his brand, as much as they are of Armani. So what is it doing to the board members who own all the Jeff Koons? So, the whole commerce thing is kind of complex.
Excellent point. I must say, but it's interesting how hard it is to get museums to think about a show like a fashion show, which is more thematic, because they're much harder to fund, and also apparently the audience figures are just not as seductive. Yes.
Yes. Well, there are different exhibitions, and I think museums probably need those crazy shows to maintain themselves. And why not? Because there are already those exhibitions that are approaching very problematic issues in fashion. For example, FIT had an exhibition on queer fashion. So it is not that there aren't critical questions in fashion exhibiting. It is more that it is not bad. The commerce is
it's out of balance
yes.
with the commerce side.
Yeah, and fashion exhibiting can happen at the store. I would like to see it more broadly, that fashion exhibiting is such an open field that the curators can do their job, and what I'm advocating is that the curators should go out and be more flexible, not stay in the museum. It's not about commerce and culture anymore.
But by another token, because going back to what you said about exhibition making, I think one of the issues maybe with fashion, a lot of these fashion shows, which do look like showrooms, fashion exhibitions, excuse me, is that topically they're trying to look at fashion critically, but in terms of the exhibition making, there's almost too much, there's not enough of that criticality, meaning, I hate to say it, but the emphasis is only on the clothes, right? So when you're only showing clothes and maybe some photographs and magazines to sort of flesh things out, you're losing that criticality in the exhibition itself. I think one of the reasons you liked David Bowie, it sounded like you liked David Bowie at the V&A, and I loved it also, was because it brought in other things too.
Context.
It's context, exactly. I mean, it looked at his years in Berlin with with some of the posters of the films he was looking at and showing some of the films. I mean, it did add that context that placed the thing itself in dialogue with other things that sussed out what it was that you were trying to communicate. And I do think it doesn't really work to do a fashion show that's just on the clothes.
Agreed. Maybe, okay, I'm being asked to wrap up. Okay, well then let's take one more question. Can I pass you the mic? Because it seems like everyone can hear you, but we probably can't.
Thank you. Not necessarily to come to the defense of museums, but most museum exhibitions don't have a critical component. They show the work of the artist, or they show the work of the photographer. So I think they've just done the same thing with the clothes. I mean, there was a marvelous one at the Met with Prada and Schiaparelli, but it was just these are art objects. I think they're taking sort of the high road in that. Although one could easily misinterpret it and see it as a huge promotion for the house. I mean, because it's still in existence. A lot of the other artists are dead, so
But in that instance, the films that they commissioned had a critical element. So I think that
as a sidebar to the show. But the shows are mounted as pure exhibition.
I think it's the shows that we the bigger population hears about that are like that. But I think, as Sandra said, there's been some incredibly strong critical fashion design exhibitions at FIT that Valerie Steele's put on, but they're the ones that you don't hear about maybe as much in the general population.
Sometimes it is about the clothes, though, because Pratt had an exhibition on black designers. And even though the show could have been way better, it didn't have, they could have done so much with that show. Just the clothes, the name of the designer, or the picture of the designer was enough. Because you got to see these designs from the early 70s by black designers that you would have never known they made. And that other people, of course, took credit for it, just like rock and roll. You know, we all know that the Beatles did not write Twist and Shout. It was a big hit before they knew it. So that show at Pratt, nobody talked about for obvious reasons. And I personally felt it could have been more exciting. But it was so interesting just to see those clothes and how when I was a little girl in 1971, I remember people wearing this. And I actually knew some of the designers from my neighborhood.
I mean, it would be interesting to see a major museum take on that show, I must say.
I mean, I hate to say that, but they would have to jazz it up with some music or something. But that show was really good. If you could look it up online, you should see it.
Yes. Final question.
I think there's also a difference in that FIT and Pratt are academic institutions, so they're going to come at it from a different perspective than the Met or other museums that are doing these exhibitions. At the same time, the Met recently had the fashion, the Impressionism exhibition that had French painting and also incorporated clothes and managed to bring in the fashion crowd, but also tied it into an art history context, which you could say that the Gautier show at the Brooklyn Museum and the McQueen show didn't really do. So I think it is possible to do both in a museum exhibition, but there seems to be a trend where that's not happening. So.
Look, this conversation is going really well. I know we have to, we should wrap it up. I was going to ask, I mean, maybe we have, I think, a major museum curator in the room. Can we ask her opinion? Is Paula here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you're hiding. Oh, I'm sorry. Like, you're...
That's okay. I agree with what's been said. When an exhibition is great, it kind of erases all of these different considerations. There can be critical shows that are about one designer. There is criticism in the way works are selected. Personally, I'm always partial to thematic shows. I love to do thematic shows. I see that my colleagues in painting and sculpture, however, are able to condense avalanches of criticism in retrospectives of one artist. So I think that quality trumps everything, and quality is about communicating something that adds to the world, that is not just a repetition of what's already been there or a vitrine. So I always think if the curator's great, everything flies.
Okay. That's a beautiful place to end. Let's have a coffee break.